Hey everyone, Lake Parker here, and it's a nice October night. I got this fire going, and I was wanting to try something a little bit different for me, and try something off script. I wanted to talk about some horror comics today that I've been reading, and that I've been enjoying thoroughly. And I figured, just the season is scarce, and I thought some of you might enjoy it. So first up here, we've got Wythces by Scott Snyder. Wythces here is one of the first comic books I ever got when I first went to a comic book shop. I picked up this and Invincible, Volume 1, way back in 2018. And Wythces is just an incredible place to start if you want to read some horror comics. Everything is contained in this one volume right here, and you get a nice, concise, really scary story. What I love about Wythces is it plays with the idea of that sensation of something lurking, right? Something kind of watching you. And what I love is that that feeling is scary enough on its own, but it asks the question, what if the things that are lurking and watching us have always been watching us, have always been around? I think the idea of that is really frightening, and it really complements the art incredibly well. Out of all the comic books I own, this is probably the one that I have lent out the most to people. It's a great read. My mom's read it, my sister's read it, and I lent it to a few friends who are interested in trying out comic books. And I think that this offers a lot for first-time readers of horror comics. Uzumaki by Junji Ito. So this horror manga is widely considered by many to be one of the scariest pieces of manga or comic books ever written. And from the ones that I've read, I would say that that is probably not that far off. If you're familiar at all with manga and the horror scene, you've probably heard of Junji Ito. And it's for good reason. His work is incredible. The art is chilling and disturbing, and the writing was really interesting too. So Uzumaki is about a town that is cursed by the spiral. And what's cool about Uzumaki is that in the beginning, it kind of plays like a collection of short stories, with each chapter being a brief kind of scare involving spirals. So people in this town become obsessed with spirals, and the spiral is some sort of supernatural element that causes all these horrors to happen because of spirals. So for example, in one of the chapters, a girl has a scar on her forehead, and it grows into the shape of a spiral, and as it goes further and further into her head, it starts burrowing into her skull and eating her whole body, absorbing her into the spiral. Or in another one, there's a series of killings happening at a hospital with women using hand-cranked drills, and that drill bit is the spiral in that instance. I think it's a really creative approach to horror. There's a lot of body horror in here. There's a lot of creative kind of horror. Things that you haven't normally seen before, so not lots of ghosts or serial killers or anything like that. But just really unsettling imagery, really disturbing ideas. And the whole thing comes together in just a really, really cool final act. And the ending itself, the final few images of the ending, really resonated with me. If you're somebody who is afraid of repeating shapes, or little holes make you uncomfortable in a repeated pattern, or if you're somebody who is grossed out by body horror or just supernatural elements that they make no sense, and if that frightens you, I think that this would be a really good read. I just loved how, as I would be turning the pages, my heart would start pounding, because I just know that I'm going to turn the page and something really, really terrible is going to be on the next page. And that image would probably stick with me for quite a while, because Junji Ito's art is seriously impressive and honestly really, really scary. What's kind of funny is that after I was finished reading this, I've had several nights where I've dreamt about spirals, which is probably not a good sign considering what happens to the people in this book that become obsessed with spirals. But I just thought that was really interesting that this book kind of lingered with me in even my subconscious. I've been recommending it to a lot of people. You've probably heard of this before already. You've probably even read it before if you're into horror comics, but I can't stress enough just how quality of a story this is, how creative it is in its horror, and I just love it. I really love it. I flew through it. So Nailbiter is about a town, Buckaroo, Oregon, that for some reason creates serial killers. There are 16 butchers of Buckaroo, all people who were born and raised in Buckaroo who would go on to become violent, horrible serial killers. And the main intrigue of this book is, what is it about this town that's creating these serial killers? Is it something in the water? Is it a curse? I think that concept alone is really, really interesting, and it plays into that mystery thriller really, really well. But what I also love is that I'm sure you've met people who are really interested in serial killers and true crime. Maybe you yourself are one of those people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that being an interest of yours, but there was certainly something quite interesting about people who have an obsession with serial killers, or who romanticize them, or are interested in them in a less understanding who they are, but being genuine like fans of them. I met a few people like that, and this book kind of examines that side of serial killing as well. The fact that these serial killers from Buckaroo are kind of elevated to a sort of celebrity status and have their own fans and people who almost worship them, I think is a really interesting thing to explore. And the whole mystery of what is special about this town, why is it creating serial killers, was a very compelling question that really made me fly through this book. It's 6 volumes. And I just completely flew through it. And I'm happy to say that at the end, I was very satisfied with the answers, even if I wasn't entirely satisfied with how they were revealed. But the answers themselves to everything that's going on, I thought was pretty cool. It just moves at a clip. There's got some really intense moments that I turned the page and I audibly would gasp. I would always take pictures of scenes that I found shocking or really, really memorable, and I was just taking pictures the whole time I was reading this just to save them for later. It's a really good read. I highly recommend it. Nailbiter. My fire is dying, and that is making me very sad because it was a really cool visual for this video, I thought. But honestly, filming in front of it was kind of stressing me out, so I'll just let it die out. The Immortal Hulk, a Marvel superhero comic on my list of really good horror comics that you should check out. The Immortal Hulk is really, really cool because it takes Hulk back to his roots of being kind of this monster story. The body horror in this book is really shocking and really grotesque and really, really cool. And what I love about it is seeing body horror in something a little bit more obviously horrific is scary for sure, but the body horror in the Hulk is just kind of unsettling in a different way, because the Hulk is this sort of family-friendly superhero, you know, the big angry guy who smashes stuff that we've seen in family movies. He's got that famous television series, and to see such terrifying imagery that shows how horrific it is for Bruce Banner to turn into the Hulk kind of leaves you feeling extra unsettled, because you just aren't expecting it to be like that, because he's a superhero. He's supposed to be heroic. It's supposed to be a heroic thing when he transforms into the Hulk, for the most part. But here it is terrifying and grotesque, and it really kind of sits with you that this is something that Banner has to live with. What I love about this depiction of the Hulk, known as the Devil Hulk in this series, is that he's kind of implied to be, maybe literally, an agent of hell, or a personification of God's holy wrath. And that is so cool. That is such a cool idea. Hulk has punished bad guys and fought bad guys and criminals throughout his many decades of storytelling and many movies that people are familiar with him with. But this Hulk is kind of judging and enacting justice on a larger scale. He's judging the world for the sins that humanity has committed, and he's acting as sort of a divine form of justice. And that is just such a unique concept that I never really would have thought of. And it was really interesting to see these sort of religious ideas being applied to the Hulk. I've never been a big fan of the Hulk. I was only vaguely aware of his mythos. He was never really my favorite superhero, but I did always know about the whole idea that Banner is ashamed of his anger. His anger causes all sorts of problems for him. You know, he gets mad, he turns into the big guy, he smashes stuff, right? But what's really cool about this Devil Hulk persona is that he puts on the idea of, can anger be a positive force for change? Is there a purpose for anger? Can anger be more than just destructive when it's wielded for the right purpose? And this book is just filled with so many cool ideas, and it's got such unsettling art, and it's playing with these grander ideas of God and hell and divine justice. And I just think it's a really, really unique read. It was definitely not what I was expecting when I heard about this series in the first place. And I am so happy that I checked it out, because it's really cool. I think it's a great read. And it's got something in there that is definitely going to scratch that horror itch that you might be feeling. Well, here we are at the end of my fire. It did not last very long, and it was probably more hassle than it was worth for the first like 30 seconds of footage I got with a really cool fire in the foreground. Halloween was never the biggest thing to me. I enjoyed it as a kid, and I kind of fell off with it. A lot of my friends just weren't ever really doing stuff for Halloween, so I would just kind of stay home and not really do anything. But within the last few years, I've been wanting to kind of just quietly celebrate Halloween on my own, and do things that I enjoy, and kind of get into the spirit of the holiday. And that has manifested with reading a lot of sort of horror comics recently, and checking out more horror movies, and going on night walks with the leaves falling. And you know, that's brought me to some really cool reads, and I think comic books as a medium is kind of slept on, and you can get some really, really cool stuff within this medium. It's not just superheroes, as you can see, obviously, because horror in writing and art has to try a lot harder to scare you, because it can't really startle you the way a movie or a video game can. It has to present you with scary ideas or really, really disturbing art that sort of sticks with you and starts to haunt your dreams. And I just kind of wanted to share that with you. This whole channel is just kind of about passion and things that I want to talk about. And, you know, horror comics is definitely something I've been wanting to talk about and been wanting to share with more people. I hope that the off-the-script format didn't totally suck. As I'm sitting here saying stuff, though, I felt like it totally did. So we'll see if I can save it in the edit. Probably not. It's not often that we celebrate fear, but it's part of our emotional spectrum. It's part of what makes us human, and I think we only ever get to feel fear in really terrible moments in our life. And I think having a chance to sort of safely celebrate fear and willingly experience fear while being safe, I think is a really cool thing. And that's why Halloween within the last few years has kind of been something I've been wanting to enjoy and experience a bit more. And I'm happy that these horror comics have been kind of my little tradition of celebration. I think I'm going to hang out a little bit out here and enjoy the nice weather and see if I can see anything in the embers. But seriously, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. I'll talk to you guys soon.